Geek Myths, a novel about life, love, and the pursuit of sonic screwdrivers. Available in paperback and Kindle edition from Amazon.
Scanning for audio.
Welcome to episode 24 of the UFOCAST. I'm Michael.
And I'm Luke.
Yes, today we are discussing something that isn't in the same order on the Blu-rays. It's because on the Blu-rays this is the second last episode, but on the DVDs it's the second from last episode. It's Timelash.
Yes.
Yeah.
That one's my fault, because I just assumed that the Blu-ray was in the same order as the DVD. And
so did I.
Yeah.
So did I. And it wasn't until I came to reviewing and making sure that I'd watched the right episode for the right review that I went, hang on, it is Timelash, isn't it? And the answer is yes, it is.
It is Timelash, yes.
Right. So,
should we get the elephant in the room out of the way?
Well, you know what? I can, because, Timelash, the UFO episode, is not Timelash, the Doctor Who episode. It's not the Doctor Who episode.
Yes, and I mean, I'm hoping you agree with me, Michael, that the UFO episode Timelash is massively superior to the Doctor Who episode called Timelash, right?
Well, strictly speaking, right, and I'm not saying I don't really enjoy this episode of UFO, however, I have got a little bit of a story, bear with me. My first video recorder was a Betamax, and we got it on broadcast, like the week of broadcast of Timelash, yeah.
The Doctor Who episode.
So, the Doctor Who episode,
yes.
Yeah, right. So I taped Doctor Who, and then I taped the Dalek story that comes after it, and then there's a hiatus of 18 months, which basically translates for UK people who didn't have repeats into the only Doctor Who I had to watch for a year and a half was Timelash and a Dalek story. Both of those things are really high on my list of things. So every single thing that you can love about Timelash, I've exposed myself to many, many times. So I've actually got quite a soft spot for Timelash. It's not brilliant. I'll put my hand up and say it's got some flaws, quite big ones, but, I'm fond of it. And I have been, singled out on social media for being a pariah for thinking like this, but I don't care, right? Because I just really liked it. I like the whole Joe Herbert being H.G. Wells, and that would be a brilliant Big Finish spin-off series where the Sixth Doctor got to travel with H.G. Wells for a bit and experience some of those stories, the other ones that H.G. ended up writing about, which would be great. And I know a lot of people are against that as well, which is fine. And what else? Well, there's some lovely... The Bandrels. I don't mind a glove puppet turning up in Doctor Who. I like the idea of aliens looking like aliens, right? And, it did look like something off Captain Zepp. And if you can't remember Captain Zepp, you can YouTube and look it up for yourself. I'm not even going down that road. Okay? But I've got a soft spot for Doctor Who's Timelash. I always will do. Yes, Perry's underused. Yes, the monsters are awful. And yes, Avon from Blake 7, Paul Darrow, is chewing a little bit of scenery there. But you know what? If you hire Paul Darrow, you get Paul Darrow. Right? So, that's my elephant in the room. Okay, I've got Doctor Who's Timelash in high regard. You'll probably hate me for this, and you'll want to delete every podcast I've ever been on. I don't care. That's just me.
That's fine. I mean, I do not have the same relationship with Timelash as you, but then I like Time and the Rani. So, and there is a general rule in Doctor. Yes, yeah. There's a general rule in Doctor Who: is if the word time appears in the title, it's not going to be a very good story, and there are very few exceptions to that one. However, Timelash is an episode of UFO. Well, okay, there's two things to talk about. There's Timelash as a time travel story, and then there's Timelash as a UFO episode. I think we need to kind of address both of those. But before we get there, I think we need a terrible synopsis, don't we, Michael?
Terrible synopsis without a tune. Right, hasn't got one. Timelash. Teleplay by Terence Feely. Directed by Cyril Fankel. Guest artist Patrick Allen as Turner, which we'll get back to in a bit. Here we go. As Straker returns to Shadow Headquarters with Virginia Lake, they notice that everything around them is totally still, frozen in time. They only prevent the same thing happening to themselves when Straker rushes to the laboratory and injects them with a chemical solution to speed up their actions. More on that one later. Suddenly, a challenge rings out. The time stoppage is the latest attempt by the aliens to destroy Straker and Shadow, engineered by the human Turner. Now Straker, Virginia, and the evil Turner must battle it out in timeless moment which no one else can interfere. There we go. Oh, also, need to say, at this point, there is a second season Buck Rogers story that's almost identical in storyline to this, which I remembered in a dream, so I'm probably wrong. But I do remember distinct moments from this appearing in that. And I haven't seen it since the sort of 1987, so possibly even before that. It might be like 1984. I don't know when Buck Rogers is. I'm not going to Google it. I just know that there was a storyline in a Buck Rogers episode where they're out in the stars. So I think it's season 2 with the big lamppost robot. Sort of thing I liked as a kid. And they do, Buck Rogers does experience almost exactly the same thing going on as this storyline, where he's stuck in a different time zone to everyone else, but that's a bit more science fiction-y. So there you go. That's it, really, on the external influences front. So I'm guessing from your early comments, you're a bit of a fan.
I think it's one of those ones that on rewatching, and particularly this time, I began to see its flaws. But certainly when I first watched it, I really enjoyed it. And I think it's still a very strong episode. But I think the reason I said we need to talk about it as a time travel story and then talk about it as an episode of UFO is because it's not really... it doesn't really play to the strengths of the UFO format, I think. No. And it's I think it's one of those things where when I originally saw the series, and before I really knew about the production block and everything, I really enjoyed these last 9 episodes. But watching it again and again, and then doing it for this podcast, and you realise that there's a different kind of backroom influence going on. We've talked about the influence of people from The Prisoner before. This is another prisoner writer authored episode. Terence Steele again.
It's possibly the most prisonery feeling one. Well, this one and next time's one are the most prisonery feeling ones of the whole run. Exactly,
and you particularly have the echoes of the girl who was death in Turner taunting Straker and Lake over the tannoy. That feels very much like the scene where McGowan goes through the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and is taunted by the girl who was death. So there were aspects of that felt very familiar from that, and the extreme weirdness of it, really, of what was going on, the sort of juxtaposition of it being about time travel, but in the film set. I mean, I suppose when I say it doesn't work to the strengths of UFO's format, it does in the sense that it's another of those episodes that explores the fact that we're in a film studio and that's the cover for Shadow, which I feel obviously gets explored again next week in the next episode, Mindbender, and in this. And in some of the other episodes more recently, I guess we had last time Reflections in the Water, again played with the film studio thing to get you into the story. So from that perspective, I think it works very well. But then when you think about it, you're like, okay, so the aliens have a weird form of time travel now, which doesn't really fit with... It just seems it's like, okay, it's a sci-fi show, we can do a time travel episode without really thinking it through. And again, what's to stop the aliens doing something similar in the future?
Yeah. Just at the risk of being a fool, I just need to say that I don't actually think of this as a time travel episode at all.
Okay.
Because all you've got is somebody's changing the perception of time, but there's no movement backwards. Narratively speaking, there is, obviously, because the story's told in flashback. After you've got that incredibly confusing opening sequence, you've then gone, hey, let's find out the truth. And it might as well have gone, diddle-doo, 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 and everyone go wibbly, and then go, and here we are, 5 hours later. Because what you could do is, obviously this isn't an option on the discs, but you could have just watched the narrative from him saying, let's go back 5 hours, and then you get the beginning at the end if that makes sense. Because it feels like this is a story, this is an episode, and I know this was never going to happen at the time. This is an episode designed for home viewing or repeat viewing, because you get a load more out of it the second time. Like the business when he's walking at the very beginning and he's going through all of the different areas that he experiences later with Virginia Lake, you only get the meaning behind those reaction shots on second viewing because he's done it. And you go, oh yeah, they're the chippies. Oh yeah, that's why the guy's driving around in circles. I get that now. But as soon as you get to the actual narrative where he's in the little cars and he's going around in circles, you go, oh yeah, that must be how that happens. Yeah. If you're watching it the first. So arguably it could happen the other way around. Now, I know there's the whole start with something exciting and it's a mystery, then build on the mystery, and then there's the payoff, which makes for a good bit of narrative. So structurally, great bit of storytelling. Yes, there's holes in it, but there's going to be. And the same hole as always, what's to stop the aliens doing that again? What's to stop X from happening? Why do the aliens give up on that idea? Yeah. It's not just a weakness of this episode, it's a weakness of the majority of episodes where there's a... And sci-fi in general. Plan of the week, yeah. No, I can see that. So you have to forgive that, you have to let it go, and you have to just go, fair enough. Yeah. Because at the beginning... I suppose you're right. Sorry, go on. It's like you say, it's not a time travel story in the sense. It is more that the narrative travels in time, like you say. And I suppose the only you have the fact that Turner is kind of somehow hopping around within the frozen moment. Yeah. But essentially, like you say, that's all it is. Is this is a frozen moment in time? And I never really fully understood the explanation. It's something to do with the fact that the UFO is moving so fast that it's compressing time. But yes, I don't know if you understood the explanation. Yeah, the explanation's a bit the flying saucer's flying 10 times faster. And how did that happen? Is it part of the travelling through space thing? Because obviously you experience time differently when you get faster speeds towards the speed of light and things like that. But everyone's just kind of, we know a bit about that, and it's everything else just becomes kind of nodding along and going, yeah, that sounds scientific enough and plausible, and it's not. And you just kind of go, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I'm sorry. It's a good. Maybe it's like most of these stories. You just think it's good unless you look at it too closely. Yeah. But that's UFO, yes. and we are here to look too closely, perhaps. So. Yeah. I mean, what do you think overall of the frozen in time effects? There is an argument that because I'm thinking they're very good. For me, I think they're good. And there is an argument that what they've done is they've gone, right, what can we do that we don't normally get to do in a TV programme that's showing off? This is the sort of thing that if it was made these days would go, hey, do you know what was a really good video effect? Or was a really good special effect or something like that could win like a Welshie or a BAFTA or something. And it'd be that episode of UFO where they froze time. That would be great. And it's kind of an advert to get that production crew more work. Because special effects these days, the ones you don't see, the extra buildings in the background or the crowd shots that aren't really there, the ones you don't notice, they're the ones that are now winning awards because people realise that, the budget was tiny, but they've still managed to make it look like $1 million quid. Yes. But I don't know. How do you feel about them? Because I liked them. Well, almost all of them. There is the general shots of these actors are standing as still as they possibly can, and they sometimes wobble a bit. That obviously, if you look too closely, doesn't work. But I think especially on Blu-ray. Yes, especially on Blu-ray. But in part, they disguise that by having camera movement, because the more that the camera's moving, the less you're going to notice an actor wobbling around. Yeah, it's not exactly bullet time. Yeah. But I think there's some of the effects, like, for example, and I was just watching it now, with the guy's cigar smoke. Yeah. I honestly don't know how they did that, because I wondered whether it was a glass shot, but then there's a slight bit of camera movement, which means it can't be a glass shot. So I honestly don't know what it is, whether there was something physically
like something more sophisticated than cotton wool attached to his thing, held up by a string. I honestly don't know. And then the sawdust on the circular saw blade, I have no idea how that was done.
I know, and it's again, like 50 years on, and we're still going. How would we do that? Because as soon as you remove computers from the equation, you're like, cool, because that's the area I'm interested in. How do you physically do something? It was like a friend of mine had this video shot in one of their degree films, and it was a rotating camera that pulled out at the same time from above. Now, if you were doing that in a studio, you'd be like, right, we hired 10 grand's worth of kit. It's all going to be fantastic. It's going to be really expensive. They put a video camera inside a carrier bag and twisted the top round and then lifted it up. And that was it. And you got exactly the same shot. So there must be workarounds that you can spot. My money was on glass shot. It really was. The only one I've got an issue with, and that's me looking back on it from 50 years in the future, is the bird. And that's only because I used to be a model maker for TV and film. That's what I was trained in for a while. And the still bird can only possibly be achieved in one way. And it's a taxidermy bird that they've suspended, or it's a bird that has been killed. Now, apparently, right up to the mid-90s, there was a person who you would send the live animal to, and then it would come back ready for your film shoot. And there were no questions asked. And I always flash back to my lecturer telling me about this person, and going, that doesn't quite sound good.
What you see, so actually, my thought was that shot was not done that way at all.
Right.
Purely because you only ever see a close-up of the bird.
Right. So you're thinking it's
filming. My assumption is it's just a photograph. That was my thought. In fact, I'm going to go back to it now just to have a look. But that was my thought with the bird was that it must be a still, because they never try and show it in a wider context. Because with a lot of the other ones, you get, here's the wide shot, like with the stool in the air.
Yeah.
Here's the wide shot with it in the air. But with the bird, you just get her kind of going, Commander, come and have a look at this. Come and have a look at this. They're looking over the guy's shoulder.
Yeah.
And then you cut to, and then it zooms in on the bird. And I don't know. My assumption was that was just a photograph. But
you know what?
I might be wrong.
Do you mind if I just believe that you're right? Because
it saves you better? Worrying about the animal cruelty involved.
Well, yeah.
But now that you've said that, I'm like, oh, maybe that is it, and maybe it's a carefully poised. But in that case, I would just, why wouldn't they have a wide shot?
No, fair enough.
Because if you've got a still bird, then you might as well do a wide shot. But yes, but again, it's one of those things where with all of this stuff, if you were doing all of this stuff now, then it would just be green screen and CGI and all that jazz.
Yeah. And, of course, although it's impressive, it's not in the way of the plot, but all it is there to illustrate the plot. For those of you who don't like using phrases like inside baseball, we just need to say that there's been a small gap in the recording of 24 hours. So, we don't actually remember precisely where we were up to, so if we repeat ourselves, well, you know what? I'm sorry. If we don't repeat ourselves, we miss something else out, again, I'm sorry. But we've come back because we love you, our dear and probably attractive listeners, and we just want to share with you a bit more UFO nonsense. So, as you said, where we're up to, probably talking about the bird?
Yes, which you have gone and looked at it again, and I meant to look at it again, and you think you can see a string, which suggests that...
I think I can see a string at about, 70 degrees.
Right, in which case it is a stuffed bird, and you are sad about that fact.
Well, I am. So, you know what? Tell you what, let's believe that there's a scratch on the piece of film that they took a photograph of, and it's not a string at all.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah, let's believe that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the thing is, right, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm definitely not a vegan. I've got a pet. None of these things are big in the exciting world of animal rights, but you know what I mean. There's always been something a bit weird about stuffed animals.
Right. Okay.
Is that all right? Is that a perfectly reasonable standpoint?
That's fair. I mean, I think taxidermy can be quite freaky at times.
Yeah.
Should we talk about...
But this isn't taxidermy, this is frozen time.
This is frozen time, yes. It's not taxidermy, yes.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Patrick Allen?
The Traitor in the Shadows.
The Traitor in Shadow, yes. Not for the first
now,
time.
Do you know what else he's famous for?
Well, I don't know what... Well, I have a couple of notes on him, but in terms of my childhood, and you are probably a bit too old for this, Patrick Allen is the voice of Tugs.
Yeah, he's the voice of something a bit scarier than Tugs.
Well, he's also the voice of the Blackadder in the first series of the Blackadder, which was just called the Blackadder. He narrates that.
Yep. I didn't know that. That makes sense.
So clearly he's not either of those things to you. Who is he to you, then?
No. He's the man on the Frankie Goes to Hollywood album single, Two Tribes. He's the person who does the in the event of an air attack speech, because he was actually the voice of the government warnings about Protect and Survive.
Was he?
The UK.
Oh!
Yeah.
Okay, I can imagine that.
So he's the reason, and also there is a I think there was a gag somewhere, possibly on a Reeves and Mortimer, when he going, and you better pay attention to me because I'm the man who kills Tarka the Otter, which is a spoiler. So I think that's him. So I'm guessing he was up for a laugh as well, but he did have one of those voices, which you can only get through cigarettes or having a heavy cold, and that's the sort of voice I want. But yes. I don't smoke and I don't have a cold, so you can't really go down that road. Yeah, but anyway, that's him.
Okay.
So that, to me, that's his voice, and that was he was always going to be the scary Frankie Goes to Hollywood voiceover man.
Okay, so for me, are you aware of Tugs?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It was a bit like Thomas the Tank Engine, only they were boats.
Yes, and it was a lot more dramatic and visually interesting than Thomas the Tank Engine.
Sort of gateway drug to Stingray.
Yes, in a sense, but I don't think they ever did any underwater stuff. There was a submarine, but you only ever saw him come up. I don't think they ever filmed him underwater. Grampus.
Well, I am aware of it, but that's mainly because I watched far too much kids' TV much further and longer into my childhood than I should have, by a substantial margin.
Well, anyway, if you haven't seen Tugs, check it out. But he's the voice of Captain Star, who is... there's two rival tugs companies in the harbour. And there's the... I can't remember what the good guys are called, but he's the voice of the good guys. And then there's the Z-Stacks, who are the baddies. So it's more antagonistic than Thomas the Tank Engine as well. And so for me, I think, and it obviously, it's a long time since I first watched this episode, but I think I almost immediately figured out who he was, because his voice is so distinctive. And although he's on film in this, it is still, as we've said, largely a vocal performance, because he's kind of taunting Straker and Lake from afar. And so they obviously had to get somebody who had one of those voices. And I think it's really, really effective.
These days you'd get David Warner.
Yes, he would be good. I'm trying to think.
Possibly not up for the running around anymore, but at some point in his career he would have been the go-to voice man.
But also, how about, and this is just because of Hitchhiker's Guide, how about Simon Jones?
Yes.
That
would have worked.
Now he's a bit older, I think he would make a good vocal villain. But anyway, I think...
And he'd probably bite your hand off, because he's always been playing lovely people.
Well, exactly.
And he never gets to play... The worst character he ever played was, I think, in Miracle on 34th Street, the remake, where he was a slightly villainous person in a shop. And even then he sort of melted towards the end. And that's like the most villainous I think I've ever seen him. Somebody's going to email in and go, oh, by the way, you do know he played Satan at some point. Well, but it's unknown to me.
I mean, have you thought about the movie of Hitchhikers?
Yes, where he plays Slarty.
No, he doesn't play Slarty. That's Bill Nighy. He plays
the voice.
He plays the defence
system, security system. Yes.
So he's a bit villainous in that, and he's like, "Ha, I'm going to fire missiles at you." Anyway, we have so digressed.
I know, and you know what? If we were doing an entire podcast on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I'd be so up for that. But that's a whole different.
That's a whole different podcast, I think.
It certainly is. Right.
Should we talk about visible stuntmen?
Oh, please do, because that's, I think, possibly my only remaining note. Yeah, I think we're going to be discussing Straker's wig and the amazing pulling something over. It's worse than Pertwee in some of his storylines with the wigness.
It's just
Blu-ray does it no favours.
Blu-ray does it no favours, but it's still very obvious on the DVD, and it's the fact that the episode starts with that as well. In that's the first thing you see is Straker coming in and having a fight, and then in all of the sort of even the medium shots, it's the stuntman, and it's only for the close-ups that they cut to him, and it's so obvious. And also with Patrick Allen later on when they have the punch-up. And it's odd because generally they've been very good at hiding that kind of thing in previous episodes, I feel. Or at least I feel this is the first episode we're really commenting on it.
It's the first time it was like, it wasn't just noticeable. You were going, oh, that's taken me out of the story at all.
Yeah.
I mean, my notes consist of this line. Shoddy stunt work, wig in the opening fight sequence, big, bad wig, and then 3 exclamation marks. And yet another traitor in shadow. But, big, bad wig, yeah. And I know, because Straker's wig... Is it a wig in this? Oh, no, he dyed his hair for this.
No, I mean, I think it was only the first few episodes where they dyed it, and then they realised that was not going to work. So it's a wig for pretty much the whole series. And certainly by this...
So do you think they just put the same wig on someone else?
It's possible, given how bad it is, that it is the same wig.
Yeah.
But... Well, also, the other thing I've noticed, and this is another shot with the stuntman in, you know the bit where they're kind of trying to progress towards him, and he gets Virginia Lake to hide behind a wall, and then he prowls along in front of the wall and gets shot at, and you're like, that's not very good military strategy, is it? You're like, you would go behind the wall.
Well, he also rolls and he hides behind a flimsy piece of wood.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a wall over there, mate. Stone thicker than wood.
Yes.
Right. Did the 3 pigs teach you nothing?
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and they are from the A-Team School of Shooting as well. Clearly, UFO have got that all. I'm just going to wave a gun in your general direction and not hit you.
Yes. But then that's a plot point, isn't it? It's the fact that he shoots at him directly and still doesn't hit him.
Yeah. So you have to shoot where he's going to be.
Where he's going to be or where he was.
Yeah, which is quite vague.
Yes.
At best, yeah. So, can we discuss one thing that is important that I need to bring up?
Right.
Right, now, I knew through reading ahead, but obviously I watched these out of order. I knew there was going to be an issue with drugs at some point.
Right.
Yeah? Because I knew that there was something a bit... And I knew the series got more psychedelic as it went on.
Yeah.
And there was an issue with drugs. Now, these days, there's big problems with showing needles on screens and people injecting and stuff like that. And they always cut away and things like that. It's very rare you see a needle go into skin or something, which you don't hear, but there's a whole thing about them. Basically, they take, and elephant in the room, they take speed. Right? Which I know from experience, the US military experimented with at this precise time. In Vietnam and amphetamine use and things like that, which was basically an extension of the technology and research had been done by the Nazis and the Germans in the Second World War to make their soldiers more intense as well. So there's a long history of all governments giving their soldiers medication in order to make them perform better.
Right.
Performance enhancements.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a long history of basically governments messing with the soldiers. So that's really not a surprise when it comes to storyline. But it was interesting that it was actually happening in real life at this point in the... Well, was the Vietnam War over by the time? No, 1970.
No, it was still very much going on at this point.
Yeah, oh God, this is turning into the rock and roll.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know how well known it was that they were doing that to the soldiers, or whether what I've done is I've mistaken a Twilight Zone episode or a Stephen King plot for real life, which is also something I do quite often.
I don't know. I know that we certainly have had emails in the past from people who have been in the military.
Yes.
So if anybody has any insight into that, I mean, it sounds plausible. I mean,
I know for a fact that they did give LSD to British soldiers. I've seen the documentary about that,
right.
And it was a real one. It wasn't just made up. I know that because people have gone to court about that one.
Yeah.
And there's lots of other ongoing stuff. So I've actually seen the footage of soldiers on LSD where they go, not particularly useful, all they did was sob, or or grin and smile.
Yes.
It doesn't turn you into better soldiers. It lets you see extra colours. That's about
Yes.
it. But this is the time when Uri Geller was vanishing from our TV screens and being used by the CIA to do that whole men who stare at goats thing. So, the world was a very different place.
Yes. Well, except that Uri Geller is still around and threatening to stop Brexit with his mind powers.
He's taking his bloody time about it. If he's going to do something, somebody said, is it ethical? And it's like, what? And everything else that's been involved is completely ethical. Seriously, it's a sliding scale of ethics.
Yes.
Mate, if you can do it, off you go.
Yes. Well, you know that Tom from formerly the Cloister Room podcast, I don't know if you listened to that back in the day, he's done a YouTube video, which I've only seen part of, about the ethics of changing history.
Right.
In a Doctor Who context, yes. And I've only seen the first half of it, but he gets to kind of analysing whether the Doctor should or shouldn't destroy the Daleks in Genesis of the Daleks.
And we don't know his argument.
I don't know what his argument because I haven't finished watching it. But anyway, I suppose the point is getting back to UFO. The dude is able to change time. It was a very bad segue, really, wasn't it?
Not really, because what we've done is because I was thinking about this in the 24-hour interregnum. There's a word you don't hear often. Where what you're dealing with is, in a sense, time travel, because you're dealing with biological time travel, which is the slowing down or speeding up of your biological processes.
Yeah.
Which is actually one of the chapters in my big book of time travel. So I was actually thinking, no, you're right, I'm wrong. This is a time travel story, just not in the there's a machine involved kind of a way.
No, but I think your point about nobody goes back in time. It's like they say at the end. It's one expanded moment of time. So it is a different.
Sense, but then, of course, they've got the mechanics of how it works. Anything that was in motion is frozen. Anything that wasn't in motion can now move, which is just weird and spurious. And it's one of those don't think about it moments.
It's very spurious because
what should actually happen is they should develop a massive amount of mass because you're in a different time zone, so you can't actually move anything.
Yes. Well, and also the whole moving or not moving thing. Like the planet is moving, so it's a sort of it's only things that weren't moving as perceived by humans, which makes it even less sensible.
Well, exactly. I mean, you've got this is an issue with time travel that I've always had for years, because usually on things like Stargate or something like that, you've got a fixed a portal that goes from one place to another. The TARDIS is not a great example of this, because what you do is you go from now, this moment, to the past. But the past, geographically speaking, is several thousand miles in another direction, possibly still in space, because you remember we're travelling around the sun as well.
Well, but the bigger problem than that is that the whole solar system is moving as well.
Well, exactly. The solar system, and then beyond that, the galaxy's expanding. So where if you did travel back in time physically from the moment that you're in now to even 24 hours ago, you'd be floating in space.
Yes.
You'd be in orbit somewhere, or you'd be 24 hours away from Earth.
Yeah.
In the sense that you'd be, however far we move around the sun, away, just on a basic level. But then there'd be some more to factor into that, because we're moving around the supermassive black hole and so on. So time travel might be possible, just people end up exploding in space because they go, oh no, I didn't make my spaceship time-proof.
Yeah.
Now, we know obviously there'd be some sort of compensators involved in the TARDIS design, because they'll have thought this through. They had the time.
Yeah.
Literally. But that's just the way things are. The Blu-ray does not do this story justice, because you end up in the exciting world of everything swaying slightly, and when he hits the chair with the stick, that's the most solid thing in the whole program, because there's other things but even then that moves slightly. Yeah, but like I said, there's the mechanics of how does the car work, because clearly there's fuel being used, which means that's being used faster. So should the car, although he's got his foot on the accelerator and it's going at 90, would it be just crawling along?
I hadn't even considered that aspect of it.
No, these are just occurring to me now, and this is the sort of thing that as a writer would make me go, oh God, all the people watching this would know this, and it's just not worth it, or move on, do something else. In your other one with the Twitter handle Luke Overthinks, I'm thinking I might be taking you on for that one. Yeah.
Yes,
right, so
I overthink
we've got
such,
the mechanics
such that I
of the
never
story.
actually make videos these days.
Exactly, it's not good, right? So story-wise, it's got flaws, but so is everything. I mean,
Yes.
so is real life if you think about it. If you told the world how we currently are at the moment in fiction, and you told it completely honestly, people would go, "It's not very likely, is it?"
This is true.
Seriously, what America votes for some TV show host to be their a failed businessman. Why would you do? Who's what? How does that work? And, sorry, you voted for something you didn't know how it was going to work, and you thought that was a good idea. And they're the obvious examples. In everybody's lives, there's stuff like that. So perhaps overthinking is just overrated.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have a podcasting career.
I'm looking at the cigar smoke, and I'm pretty sure it's a glass shot.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah. So, we've got basically, I would say, a decent story. It's a bit psychedelic. I enjoyed it, yeah. I don't know what the general fan approach of this is. How do they feel?
I think this is potentially another divisive one, but I don't know. People, well, I don't know. We can ask our listeners. Please comment. Is this one that you enjoyed or not, and why?
Because it's got the same things wrong with it as all the others. What's to stop the aliens doing the same thing again? But
yes, but I think, like we said before, that's a criticism that can be levelled at most episodes,
or most programs in general.
Yes,
so that's fine. Yeah. There's lots of nice moments in this, but it's a bit. And let's hang on. We haven't actually read. There's two things that I need to talk about. List. Virginia Lake, very good in this.
Yes,
right. They actually make use of her, which is good.
Yeah.
And there's a bit when they're walking down the corridor, because the story's not told narratively. There's a bit where the woman in the famous red dress that makes many appearances in the program, and a bloke you see in loads of things from the 70s. I don't know. He's one of these actors that you just recognise instantly.
Well, he's coming up in Anderson Watch. So
I'm not surprised.
We'll talk about him then.
And him, and they're there. But halfway through, there's an episode. There's the moment that's frozen in time, and unfortunately, he's leering at her.
He is,
and it's tremendously uncomfortable. You're like, okay, can we move on now?
Yeah.
Right? Seriously, please, let me move on. Oh God, they haven't moved on yet.
Yeah.
Move on now.
Yeah.
And that's possibly the most uncomfortable that I've felt in an episode of this whole program.
Yeah,
series.
It's one of those of its time moments, isn't it? It is. It
really is. But I don't know. I was getting the feeling from the guy's face. It was like, do I really need to be doing this? Don't know. Perhaps the acting just wasn't quite as good as it could have been on that one.
Yeah.
Or maybe I was just reading too much into it. I don't know.
I don't know.
So, right, let's do the traditional Who Watch, Anderson Watch, etc.
Yes.
Unless you've got anything else you need.
No. I think we need to wrap up anyway. But yes. So, anybody that you spotted that you want to talk about?
Right, that guy. He wasn't Leela's dad from the 17, was he?
Which guy?
The one I was just talking about.
Oh, the Leary guy.
Man.
No, he wasn't. He's an actor called Ron Pember.
Oh, it's not ringing any bells at all, but you did see him in loads of stuff in the 70s.
Yes, I think he was one of these people who was in a lot of things. Anderson-wise, he was in an episode of The Protectors, which is not surprising. This happens a lot with characters in UFO who turn up again. They end up in The Protectors of Space 1999. What I know him from, though, is an episode of Red Dwarf.
Ah, which one?
Better Than Life. He's the tax man that threatens to break Rimmer's hand.
Of course he is.
But obviously that's sort of, 20 years after this. So he's obviously a lot older. But it was one of those things where I was like, even from his brief appearance, because obviously you do see him moving and talking briefly in the unfrozen bit. But I was like, who is he? Why do I recognise him? And that's why. But he was, like you said...
I would have been guessing for weeks, but that was so right.
Yeah. But he's, like you say, he's just one of these people that crops up in everything. He was quite a prolific actor.
Right.
And the other person who, I don't know whether you spotted him, he appears in Anderson Watch, but did you spot Inspector Frost's second in command from A Touch of Frost?
You know what? The only other character I can remember from Touch of Frost is the desk sergeant who was played by David Jason's actual real-life brother.
Right.
That's the only character I can remember from Touch of Frost apart from David Jason, so no.
So he's an actor called John Lyons, who was one of the shadow guards in this, and he was uncredited in ESP, and then he turns up again next episode in Mindbender. So you can look out for him then. We've already talked about Patrick Allen, but he's on here because he, again, appeared in an episode of The Protectors.
The Protectors?
Yes. Yes, so we've got him. And then Cyril Frankel, who you name-checked at the beginning as the director of this episode. Guess what he directed 4 episodes of?
Was it The Protectors?
Yes. Yes, he did.
Fair enough.
There's just one other Doctor Who watch, and I didn't spot him first time round, so I doubt you did, but I'm going to give you a go on it anyway.
No, you don't even need to go down that road. If we haven't already discussed them, it's just not an option.
Well, so here we go, and it's extra special because his counterpart had already appeared in an episode of UFO, Flight Path, I think it was. John J. Carney, who played the guy with the silly uniform, studio security. You know, when they're chasing Strake at the beginning. He was Blood Axe in The Time Warrior. And we've already had Iron Grun in Flight Path.
We certainly have.
So the two of them both get to be... Well, I suppose both of them before they were in Doctor Who. That's a lot of... With these things, you kind of think, oh, actually, in most cases, unless it was a black and white episode of Doctor Who, anybody who was in Doctor Who hasn't been in Doctor Who yet when they're appearing.
They're on their way to.
They're on their way to, yeah. So that's that.
So is that everyone?
That's everyone. There's no prisoner. I mean, as we've already covered Terence Feely for the last episode that he wrote. But again, we mentioned it before. Another prisoner writer writing this episode. So yeah, I think that's. Is there anything else to say about Timelash?
No, all covered. It took 2 days to record, but we got there in the end.
We got there in the end. So 2 episodes to go. Next time, as we said, is Mindbender.
Certainly is.
And then the long sleep to finish off.
And then we're done.
Yeah. So.
Well.
Go on. What were you going to say?
No, all I was about to say was I think that's the end of this particular episode. Be seeing you.
Be seeing you.